And after everything, there we have it. Alright, so part one of the basically DIY carbon rear wing. And to start off, we're going to start making the core of the wing. Once I have the core, then I can essentially wrap it in carbon, vacuum bag it down, do all that stuff. So the core is going to consist of technically 4 pieces, 2 pieces of foam, and the 2 3D printed end condition end plates, I'm going to call them, that'll essentially have threads in them that you can then bolt end plates to. So first things first is we got to get our foam core pieces cut. I'm using my homemade hot wire cutter that I use, basically made from salvaged 3D printer parts. So if you're interested in that, look at the video right before this. But before we get to that, the wing is going to be 74 inches wide, which is why I can't just buy a generic one off of the internet, because not many of them come that big, and if they are thousands of dollars. So it's going to be 74 inches wide. There's 2 inches taken up in the 3D printed parts, so I need 2 foam sections at 36 inches to give me 72 inches. So that's where we're going to start with. So this is nothing special. This is not composite foam, because that's very expensive, especially in 2-inch thickness. This is your standard pink extruded polystyrene that you can get from Home Depot. This stuff is 2 inches thick. I have it measured out and squared out to the wire at a 36-inch section. So we're gonna cut that, cut a second one, and then we're gonna cut the wing profile using the hot wire cutter. So let's get to it. All right, so we're back at the laptop, which is sending straight Gerbil software to the Arduino. And basically with this, since I'm just cutting it straight up and down and there's no program for it, I just set the feed rate down here, and then I'm just going to jog the whole y-axis up, and it should just cut right through it. The power supply is on, so the hot wire is hot, and here we go. So this is the cut face that we just cut from there. So as you can see, using the hot wire gives us a very clean finish that's very uniform. So this stuff cuts really nice with the hot wire cutter, a lot better than a knife, which is that surface. So yeah, now I just need one more section and then we can cut the wing profile. Okay, so I've spent some time tuning the feed rate for the extruded polystyrene, because it's just a lot higher density than like the white expanded polystyrene, and a couple of issues where basically this back edge where it meets during the cut, it gets so thin that it's singeing it. And I think I've done 4 cuts now, and I think I've got it to where I needed to be. I started too fast, then I went too slow. Now it's at an acceptable level of singe, so I got the zeros set basically as best as I can. So I think now it's just time to give her a shot and see what happens. All right, so we got this set up basically right on the line, because it has a little 2mm feed in rate, and I'm biasing it a little bit to this side of the table because I noticed over here the wire is less consistent. So it's biased to the right just because this seems to be the flatter part of the table, and this end is a little bit kittywampus and not super flat, but the wire is straight regardless of where the table is, because I've manually set the wire heights to be the same, and it is the same gap all the way across. Okay, so first go around wasn't super great. The feed rate was still a little high, which caused the wire to lag behind and gave some weird kind of rippling effect. As the wire would jump through, it would catch up to where it was, and then it would just kind of teeter and rock. Although after this is covered with carbon, I don't think the ripples would even be apparent because I'm going to be using a thick carbon. My laptop did die in the middle of it, and of course the wire stopped moving at that point in time. That's obviously not going to get filled in with carbon. Alright, so I decreased the feed rate by 30%, and yeah, this came out way better. There's still some micro ripples, but like nothing like the first one, so we'll probably end up just cutting another one just like this, same feed rate, same machine parameters, and then this will be the foam cut for the core. Alright, new day, shaved my face, everything. Last part that I needed to finish the end plates, end conditions, I'm calling them, for rear wing T-nuts. These are basically standard furniture T-nuts, but they should have a holding capacity and a torque capacity greater than standard brass inserts, like heat set brass inserts. I have those. I've used them plenty of times, but over time, basically repeated use, they can fatigue and essentially the hold will strip and then they'll be able to spin. And these ones shouldn't have that. These are nothing fancy, they're just plywood T-nuts, so my parts are thick enough to allow something like this to be used, so we're gonna do that. And as far as I know, I've never seen anyone do it before, so it's something new, but there's no reason it shouldn't work, so we're gonna try it. Alright, so we just have the T-nut threaded onto a long bolt that I can then pass through and pull into the material once it's heated up. So all I'm going to do is take a heat gun, heat up the insert, heat up the base material just a little bit, let it slide down and pull it through, and it'll seat itself. Alright, so there they are. Those are fully set into the plastic and seated, and they look they look good. They don't look like there's any sort of reason where they wouldn't work. I just threaded a bolt in until it bottomed out and gave it a good turn, and it didn't budge at all. So this might be my solution for doing like heavy duty torque resistant inserts into plastic, as long as your depth and your area allow it. I'm not going to be using any special adhesives for this because at the end of the day the carbon is what's going to hold it all together, because the carbon will be a full piece end to end. So I'm just going to use something like Super 77 because that's really good with carbon and epoxy, and it doesn't like make it react in any weird way. So I'm just going to use that to stick these together for the time being, and then basically just ensure that everything stays straight when I pull vacuum on the wing when I go to cure everything. So yeah, we're just gonna quick stick these together and then the core will be finished. So this piece is just one of basically the other side of what was cut off, like in a section like that. And what I can use it for is to actually put the profile in and hold it. Yes, I know there's a little bit of a depth difference there, but that's from that and singeing a little bit during cutting. Basically when I do a final trim, I'll make the edge straight no matter what. So even if I cut off a little plastic, it's okay. So all I'm gonna do now is just kind of glue all these things together using this tray as a way to keep it sort of in the same plane. It also keeps it from rocking while I'm trying to press and stick things together. And all I'm gonna really make sure is that the leading edge of all the components stays in a straight line. Alright, here's our two wing halves with our stuff glued on. So now it's just glue them together here and then the core is done. Alright, so there it is. There is the Time Attack wing core. It's time to actually wrap this thing in carbon. Alright, so we have our 2 layers of carbon, our peel ply, and also our resin flow matrix green stuff. All this does is for resin infusion, this allows resin to travel back and forth more freely than just permeating through the fabric. And given the fact that this is such a big piece, I definitely want the flow matrix. I don't plan on having it feed in at one end and pull all the way across. I'm gonna give it 2 feeds on either end, so two cups of resin, and then have it pull right in the center so it just pulls from either side. And I'll have the spiral cord wrapped around there. So I'll do a full kind of layup tutorial, like a stack up, before I actually pull vacuum on it, just so you can see everything. But everything's cut. Now we just need to wait for the bag to get delivered that we're gonna use for this. All right, so we got all of the fabrics cut out. We got the carbon, the peel ply, the flow media, we got the resin in the mail, and then we got our bag to make everything easier. We got our cup set up with our clamps. So now it's just time to lay this thing up, and it's gonna take a while, so I'm not even gonna try and flow resin or mix any resin until I know it pulls down right and everything's good. So it's gonna be a time lapse. I'm gonna set you up on the camera, crank some tunes, and we're gonna get to this thing. Right, so did an initial vacuum pull and everything, and it actually pulled down really, really nice. And then I was able to kind of flip it over and position all of our stuff. But then there's a spot that didn't get peel ply on the other side, and I think it's just cut a little bit short. So I just need to add a patch there and reposition everything and make sure it pulls down nice again. Double check that everything's where it needs to be, and then we'll be ready to mix some resin. But that's just gonna be a lot of me. So back on the tripod you go, and another time lapse, whatever the heck you want to call it now. All right, so we have it all bagged down. I got my inlets for my resin on either end and my vacuum port in the middle. It's kind of bunching at this front edge, and I'm kind of worried that it's grabbing that front edge carbon and pulling it out. But at this point, I can't get it to actually pull this way anymore because the resin matrix is very kind of pokey. So it's grabbing the peel ply and pulling with it, because this isn't following the front leading edge. It's just kind of crushing, just because the bag it's a bag. It's going to squeeze both ways. So there might be a little bunch of carbon at the front edge, so I might have to trim that off, and I might have to patch it later. But at this point, it's for me. It's not like I'm selling it to anyone. So even if it does have little imperfections, I'm okay with it. It's still going to work way better than anything that I could buy off the internet for the price that it's costing. So I'm gonna pull vacuum one more time, get everything set, and then get ready to actually put resin in everything. And when resin starts to flow, I will pick back up. Okay, so resin infusion did not really go to plan. Basically anything that could have gone wrong did. You saw the last part where it was still pulling across, and then basically after that the pot life on the resin ran out and it started to cure in the pots, which is probably on me for getting too fast of a hardener. I thought I had enough time, but I didn't. And then later on after that, my vacuum pump actually seized up and died. So there's a chance this worked and there's a chance that it didn't. So we're gonna basically try and strip as much of this off and see where we're at. Okay, so it's actually turned out way better than I was expecting with every problem that I had. It looks like there's a dry spot here that I could probably just refill with some resin when I get to it. And there's a dry spot here, but that's so close to the edge it might get cut off. And all these marks are just from taking the screwdriver and getting it under the peel ply to pry it up, because with this much surface area, I can't just pull it up by hand. It's not working, especially because when the vacuum died, you got a pool. I got pools of resin in different places, but thankfully when I peel the peel ply off, since that's right on the surface of the carbon, that excess resin is coming off with this. So it's leaving me with this. It's a very matte carbon right now from the peel ply texture. And these marks I could basically sand out, or if I basically take water or any sort of clear coat, it'll basically get rid of those. But yeah, that's all there is to this. And then basically I'm gonna demold it all and then you'll see the end of it, but it's just a lot of me working the screwdriver in and peeling this up. It's basically just gonna take, it took me just 40 minutes to do this. So I have that, and then the whole other side, I think once I get one side off, the back side will, or technically the top side, will hopefully come off easier than this because gravity made the resin pool on this side. But yeah, so check back and we'll see this when it's fully demolded. All right, so this is now at a state where I'm happy with it. There's still a little bit of basically consumables stuck on the ends, but that's in my 1 inch of kind of sacrificial area that I had to put for like the resin feed lines and stuff like that. So that's actually going to get cut off. That final inch on either side is going to get cut off, so I'm not worried about that. So this is a 3D printed mold that I'm going to be using for the not the uprights, but the part that actually connects the uprights to the wing. So this profile here is going to match up with the underside of the wing, and then it obviously 90s down to supports, and it actually has different adjustment holes. My plan is that when I vacuum carbon down to this, it'll actually detent into these holes just a little bit, and then I can see where they are and I can drill them. That way the dimension from this point to these 4 adjustment holes back here is all the same arc. So center to center distance is the same for all of them. So if I don't have to measure those out by hand, then it makes the parts uniform, and honestly it's just the best way to go. And I've always been curious if this is going to work or not, so we're going to try it. Okay, so this is the underside. So this is where the glass surface, that's why you get a really nice smooth finish. And some of this haze is just some wax that's left over from on the glass, so you can just kind of buff that off and this will turn out really, really nice. Where this kind of line is, that's the edge of the cores inside, just because the vacuum can't press right there because there's a core edge. So it kind of gives you a really good idea of where you can rough cut things to start getting your pieces out of this big piece. But this is the last pieces that needed to be made before I can start actually trimming and cutting the wings, so, and assembling it all together. So that's the next step. All right, change of venue time because we're now ready to cut everything. So we got our wing to upright brackets, adapters, whatever you want to call them, the wing itself, and our two uprights and our two end plates. So we're in the garage, we'll get the box fan set up, blow this dust outside as we're cutting it, and hopefully within an hour or so we can actually see how this thing kind of looks on the car, which will be very exciting and highly motivating. So let's get to it. All right, let's mount the wing. Let's do this. We can figure it out. Of course we can. This is kind of approximately where it is. That's extra resin that got poured onto it during repair process. It still needs to be sanded and clear coated, so I'm not worried about how it looks right now. That can be done all after it's mounted. I just want to get it on the car. My initial plan was to take the end mounts and actually rivet them to on the inside of the trunk frame, but there's not enough space and this seam is at an angle. So what I'm gonna end up doing is creating little steel brackets that get welded right to this edge face that then this bolts to, and that will allow the trunk to actually slip in around those mounts. So I 3D printed this little piece, and it's basically the bottom section of the end plate and just a piece down that will then get welded onto the inside of the chassis. So from 3D print, just use that as a template. Make two of these guys out of little sheet steel. Trace the patterns, trace the holes, cut it out with an angle grinder. So now we just need to drill these holes, prep the trunk surface, and then we can actually tack these into place. Get a general idea of what we're looking at. I'll probably just tack it on one, like the front edge or something like that, and then we can double check that everything lines up and everything's good. I love using 3D prints because look at how nice that edge matches up with both sides. Bolt holes line up, and the plan is to take this guy and drop that right onto the chassis so you have this very clean seam. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna weld the bottom edge of that inside there, and you get a very, very seamless chassis mounted rear wing. All right, so we got the paint cleaned off in there, and I'll probably end up having to do some touch-up paint on this side, but that's fine because I want to paint that bracket black anyways. But that's where I'm thinking it's gonna live, kind of, sorta. Obviously, once I get a tack on there, I will bend it back up straight and basically get the other side and everything to be perfectly vertical before I actually fully weld things in, but just having a tack there will help. Right now it's just held by a magnet, but that's the thought process. So now that that's located, we just need to put a tack there. Gonna be honest, I kinda eyeballed the crap out of this distance. And I also measured this distance from there to there and there to there in like 3 different places on both sides. And yeah, I don't really have a good datum point to measure to. So I'm just gonna going off by feel and appearances, and this looks right to me, so this is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna put a couple more tacks on this side. That side's already freestanding on its own, and then we'll actually get to kind of see what this is gonna look like. I'd be lying if I said that went smoothly. This back section here must be where they glued the two body panels together before they spot welded them, because it was really hard to get a bead to go. But basically from this third bolt or second bolt hole forward, I was able to get good bead all the way across. So now we just need to throw a quick splash of paint on these, and then I can bolt up the uprights to them again. Alright, so I just kind of wanted to see how this looked mocked up. We have our wing to upright brackets in there just to kind of give it the right pitch. And honestly, it's really close right there. I might move it up a little bit, but I also wanted to put the trunk on to see how everything fit. So you can see, how the mounts work. They just slide in between the trunk and this outer rail. But yeah, that's how we can chassis mount it without a ton of effort and like making huge giant gantries to help mount the wing. That's mounted to the chassis. The exterior body is the chassis. And after everything, there we have it. It's a carbon wing. It's of the right profile. Is it perfect? No, it's not. But it is good enough for who it's for, which is me. So, yeah, it's not perfect by any means. It has a little bit of a ricketiness back and forth, but I'm just gonna fix that with just like a little X-brace across, put everything in tension and compression, and that will go away. It just kind of happens when you have this long of a span and the trunk metal isn't as stiff as I was hoping it would be, so it just kind of walks a little bit. It's not the mounts itself, it's actually the metal underneath that it's attached to that's walking back and forth, allowing it to pivot like that. And there's just compliance with everything and everything else. So yeah, that's what I did. The finish is a little uneven because there's some excess resin and there's some clear coat that went on heavier than others, but that's a problem for a different day. If I really get worried about how it looks, then I'll fix it. But for now, it'll do the job that it's supposed to. So if you learned anything along the way or found any valuable tips, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. But yeah, that's it. There is a DIY carbon rear wing.